Hey everyone, and welcome back to episode 11 of What's Your Favorite Scary Story? This episode, we got some pretty good stories, and of course we have some guests, so I would like to thank Brianna, Nick, and Sam for being a part of this episode of Scary Stories. So, let's just jump straight into it, and let's start with that first story. Small coffins.
Mommy, why is that coffin so small?
I felt the tightness in my chest grow, and at the same time I almost laughed. The whole situation was absurd. People were sobbing, you could feel the heartbreak in the air, and my daughter was just being innocent and curious. That's because there's a small person inside, I told her. A simple answer to a simple question. She was kicking the grass with her sneaker. I was hoping that she would leave it at that. I didn't have the strength to explain any further. The priest finished his prayers. Everyone gathered near as the coffin was lowered into the ground. I threw a single white chrysanthemum into the grave. It was just all so wrong. I felt intense anger and sorrow, but I tried to keep myself together in front of my little girl. She was too young to understand. Heck, even I couldn't understand how a horrible accident like that could happen.
Mommy, I want to go.
Sure thing, honey. We could go now. I looked at the sky. It was a beautiful day. Hey, you know what? Let's walk through the park. We might see some ducks if we're lucky.
Yay!
She screamed and started running. I nodded at the priest and walked away. I couldn't look anyone else in the eye. I just focused on my daughter and wished that I could somehow absorb some of her joy and happiness. We had a nice evening at the park and walked the whole way home. Normally, I wouldn't let the kid watch TV before bedtime, but it had been such an exhausting day for both of us, so I just put on Peppa Pig and we curled up under a blanket. I smelled her hair and closed my eyes. This, right here, was my whole world. The doorbell woke me up. The TV was still on and my daughter was lying next to me. I went to open the door and was surprised to see the priest from yesterday.
Good morning, Miss Duncan.
He smiled gently and looked over my shoulder.
Oh, Peppa Pig? My daughter used to love it too.
Hi,
It's all right, Miss Duncan.
the priest said and moved a little, and I saw a woman behind him.
I'm sorry, but we felt like this couldn't wait any longer. This is Nurse Kelly.
I realized where this was going. I panicked and looked at my daughter, who was now sitting on the couch and staring at us.
Your friends were worried about you yesterday. They said you were talking to yourself. It's time, Miss Duncan. Nurse Kelly here will escort you to the hospital. You need to start dealing with this.
No. I screamed, and my daughter was now standing on the couch. Her mouth was silently closing and opening, and blood started to pour from her head. I felt my heart break into a million pieces, and then everything went black. So I actually really like this story. I mean, I did change it so that instead of it being a little boy, it was a little girl, since it'll probably be a little bit easier for a girl to emulate a younger voice than a male, since most of my friends have pretty deep voices. But I think it's a pretty fun story. It has a little good twist, and it has a little bit of a Sixth Sense vibe, which, if you haven't seen that movie, I highly recommend it. That is an amazing movie. But let's get to this next story. Love from Above. Jessica woke to find a cold cup of coffee waiting for her on the nightstand. She smiled at the thought of Steve pouring the cup just for her and tiptoeing into the bedroom before he left for work. She imagined he'd left a secret kiss on her forehead, soft enough not to wake her. She'd felt him once, petting her head gently. It took all her strength to keep her eyes shut, to pretend to be asleep instead of reaching out and hugging him tight. She gathered these sweet little moments in her heart, keeping them in a drawer so she could open them when things weren't as nice, and things were often less nice. Steve barely spoke to her these days. When he wasn't at the office or on a business trip, he was still somewhere else in his own mind, not here with her. It had been like that since the accident, the one that seemed to break her spine and her marriage all in one hit. The driver that hit them had gone mad from the guilt, and last she'd heard, he'd simply vanished out of the lives of his friends and family. Jessica wondered who had gotten the worst of it, the man who lost his mind, or the woman who lost her legs. She knew she'd never be out of a wheelchair, but these little gifts gave her hope that her marriage was still capable of healing. This was, after all, the third coffee this week, and there were other things. The rocks he left on the bedside table with their initials carved into them, the Queen of Hearts card he left under her pillow. So why then was he cold and distant? Why did he brush her affections away and ignore her text? Why did he never get around to helping with the task that she couldn't do herself? The raccoons thrashing about in the attic, and the leak in the corner of the bedroom ceiling. A few hours before Steve was due back from work, Jessica took a nap. She woke up to the feeling of Steve brushing her hair through his fingers. It felt wonderful, but something smelled foul. She couldn't allow the secret sweetness to go on. Her desire for him to love her openly was breaking her heart into pieces. So this time, she didn't pretend to sleep, but instead opened her eyes. A man was sitting on her bed, dirty and with a full beard and wild hair. He was running his toes through her hair, gently, lovingly, a knife resting on his thigh. Jessica screamed and lunged out of bed, digging her nails into the floorboards to drag herself away. In the hall, she could see the ladder to the attic was open.
"Don't go,"
the man called. He began to saw at his thigh, blood spilling into the fabric of his ragged pants.
I'm sorry for taking her legs. Please, take mine.
So this story was a little bit weird, and I know the entire time that I was reading it, I was like, okay, where is this going to go? What's going to happen? And I feel like it was a little bit predictable. I think after reading so many stories, they all start to get a little bit predictable, so I like to find ones that, aren't. But this one I felt was, but that doesn't diminish the fact that I do like this story, and that it brings you for a little bit of a trip of this poor woman and her failing relationship to a man putting his feet in her hair. That's so nasty. I mean, disgusting. But let's stop thinking about feet and hair and let's move on to the last story, which is the old baker. The old baker. While I was looking for some groceries, I saw a bake shop nearby the mall. Nobody seemed to be ordering anything, so I thought it was almost closing for the day. When I entered, a nice old lady greeted me with a smile and let me choose some pastries. All of them looked very appetizing. I settled on some muffins and bought some banana bread for my family. After the groceries, I took a bite out of one of the muffins and it was heavenly. The next day, the old lady was still there, greeting me with a smile. My nephew's birthday was coming in a few days, so I decided to order a special cake. I told her I wanted a special ice cream cake for Jeremy. I didn't see any freezers in the bake shop, so I decided to change my mind. However, she still agreed. I gave her the money and bought a couple bagels and went on with my day. Eventually, Jeremy's birthday arrived. I came to the bake shop again. The old lady greeted me again, and with her signature smile. However, something felt off. She suddenly collapsed onto the floor and said that I was the new baker. I didn't know what she meant, so I ran, but the doors were locked. In fact, every door was locked. I couldn't break free. My phone was in my car, and the keys didn't seem to work. It's been 36 years, and I still stand behind the counter, waiting for someone to enter. Anyone, so they can take my place. Just then, the bells on the top of the door rung. So I decided to do this story because I was kind of like, what even just happened after reading it? Because, I mean, there's not that much of a twist. It's just, oh, you're a baker now. And that's all that really happens. But I thought it was kind of funny that that was all that happened, so I decided to put it in this episode. So in terms of ranking the episodes, I'm going to go with Small Coffins, Love from Above, and The Old Baker. So thank you everyone for watching this episode of What's Your Favorite Scary Story. Next week, of course, we're going to have some more stories and some new guest people. But let's flash forward to the next review.